Partnerships at VNV Advisory, a project developer in the Global South. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important dialogue, Financing the Nature Removal Pathway, a project developer's story. Today we are going to explore several avenues and several stakeholders that are involved in a project developer's story and how we leverage different kinds of climate finance and in particular carbon finance down to the ground and the communities that we work with. So just a short introduction, a brief introduction of VNV and who we are. VNV is a project developer. We've been around for close to 17 years now, and our presence is felt in 14 plus countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Africa, and we're only expanding. We work very closely with rural communities on the ground in least developed countries and developing countries, and we develop these projects with a network of implementation actors and at scale. The idea is to increase value within the organization to be able to deliver at the scale that we need for the finance that is needed down on the ground. So this is just a small snapshot. We have around 100 million credits in our portfolio over the next 15 years. We've been in the market for about 16 to 17 years and mobilized over $1 billion for our partners and our projects so far. So I'm going to dive straight in because I think the way that you would understand the on-ground realities is best through case studies and real-life stories. We're going to go through 5 case studies of VNV's projects in different countries, focused on nature removals, of course. The first one being in Tanzania, cultivating conscious communities, where we are working with about 2,500 farmers over 2,500 hectares in Tanzania in East Africa to achieve carbon sequestration through native tree planting and agroforestry practices. Now, the really interesting thing in my presentation today and in the case studies that you will see today is not only the mitigation aspect, because that's what we all talk about, but it's how we can leverage that private sector finance and public sector finance as blended financial models as well into adaptation techniques and how we can build resilience and how we can tell the story of permanence by building up these communities. So in this community, for example, it is the first women's football team that has been organized and that has been actually made by the local communities, which actually shows a lot of resilience and a lot of inclusion as well through the communities and through the project development practices. There are issues of internet connectivity, rural electrification, and water access. And these are the things that we intend to work on by leveraging that private sector finance into the project. So that's Tanzania. That's a picture of our women's football group in Tanzania as well. Moving far east to Timor-Leste, which I'm sure all of you know that accessibility would be a huge issue here. In this country, through agroforestry and through native species, planting of native species, we have aggregated farmer groups that would not have been brought together unless for this project, right? So the economic resilience can be seen in these Timorese communities. It is a country where there is a lot of import that's happening because of lack of market linkages, and that's something that we're addressing as well through our practices and through the products that come out of the agroforestry projects. This is our team in Timor-Leste. It is an organization that was once very small, but now, because of collective action and because of community involvement and inclusion, they have grown into a much bigger team, and we're working on close to 3,200 hectares of agroforestry in the country. Mahonko. This is Madagascar. Madagascar is the 4th largest island in the world, and the island is home to 80% of the world's endemic species. If that doesn't say enough, the communities are changing the narrative completely. These communities used to earn their revenue through the illegal charcoal logging industry of mangroves, and now, cut to the year that we're in, with our implementation network, we are reaching out to the communities to earn income streams from building mangrove ecosystems that are resilient not only for them, but for their future generations as well. So the program interventions include skill development programs, NTFPs, to raise community awareness about carbon markets so that we can understand how to make them self-resilient and self-sustainable through the entire project development. This project actually covers over 20,000 hectares and building in 3 different regions. We have Diana, Sofia, and Malaki. And the project duration, of course, is for 20 years. And this is a mangrove afforestation project. Trees for Livelihoods, an agroforestry program with smallholder farmers in Madhya Pradesh in India. One of the issues that we have with farmers in India, of course, is that they never retire. They work and work and work until they don't have to anymore. So a key intervention in this would be to have pension plans and to have a retirement plan for these farmers, financial inclusion, financial access, and exposure to several revenue streams that they might not have had unless for carbon markets and for, of course, blended financial models. Propagules for Progress. This is also a story of resilience, one which started off, or I would say, started building up in the year of 2004 when the tsunamis hit Aceh and North Sumatra in Indonesia. This project actually brings together women self-help groups and encourages them to have financial independence and connects them via digital marketplaces to the rest of the world through batik products, through fruit products and non-timber products, and through mangrove building and mangrove ecosystems as well. So how do we maximize these opportunities for growth? These case studies are, of course, great, and we do know the benefits that carbon finance and climate finance can bring into these communities. But how do we make room, and how do we make room for inclusion of different stakeholders and bring that all together? So I'm going to go through some of the challenges that we face as project developers and how we can address it. And this would be a really good segue into the panel that you're going to experience as well after this. The first one being clear objectives. Keeping the project goals and the vision in sight at all times, and ensuring that this takes precedence over any challenges or obstructions that may come in the way of project developers and communities that are trying to address and face climate change head-on, right? Scalability and growth potential. Firstly, it is the ability to scale. And we all know that our partners and our implementing networks have this ability to scale, and they have the enthusiasm or the keenness to scale these projects as well. If we increase institutional capacity, if we strengthen governance systems, and we enable self-sufficiency within these communities, there's nothing really stopping them to scale. Market dynamics, fluctuation in carbon pricing can affect scalability as well. And evolving methodologies and parameters can delay the scalability of such projects that see success at a pilot level. The rate at which we scale is also dependent on various other actors and various factors. And we need to also understand that every delay that there is on paper or theoretically affects communities directly, proportionately, if not in a more magnified and intense way. Risk assessment. Now I would like to talk about policy regulations, international agreements, and basically the simplification of market mechanisms and regulations that can actually help a project with their risk management strategies and finding solutions instead of creating obstacles in the path of project developers and implementation actors alike. A risk management strategy, of course, is important, but with a clear and realistic idea of what we're dealing with on the ground. Only once we have our boots in the ground, in the mangroves, and we're actually with the communities and we're planting these mangroves, do we understand and realize what a day's work is in the life of these community members. Financial viability. There are, and I will be candid, there are several barriers here by investors and from the top-down approach in terms of, again, scalability, financial viability, carbon credit pricing, the models that we deal with, the business models that we deal with directly affect the project development scale and the project development pathway and the evolution of it over the years. Now, we talk about permanence and we talk about risks of reversal, but we really need to understand that permanence can be established if we penetrate through the communities and make sure that there is a resilience that is inbuilt and that cannot be hindered by white papers or by discussions. And of course, those are important as well, but it needs to translate into practical action on the ground. And the last one is clear methodology and parameters. Now, as project developers, I think we do deal with this on a daily basis, where we see methodologies changing and evolving on a month-on-month basis, and that's something that really affects the pace at which we can scale and which we can expand our interventions to as well. And like I said, this is directly proportionate to the impacts and the effects that the communities see on the ground. So if we are to talk about the issues of permanence, the issues of eligibility, the issues of holding up international standards, a convergence or cohesion of various stakeholders that we have in the room today is absolutely essential to bring to the conversation. So with that, I would like to hand over to one of our implementing networks, who will be making a presentation next. We do have 5 case studies that you've seen here. And there will be panelists who will be representing some of these case studies within our implementation network as well as investors and as well as other public sector actors. But for now, I'd like to hand over, having set context, hand over to Mrs. Melinda from Yagasu, Indonesia, who will take you through a little bit of the work that we're doing and give you a snapshot of what the communities are doing and how we're building propagules for progress in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. Very nice to meet you in the room. I'm from Indonesia. My name is Melinda Suryani Hareva. I'm as the managing director of Yagasu. Our experience in the carbon project, we have the first project with the livelihood fund. We already have the register for the got the certificate from Vera. 2015, and now already three times for the verification. And now we have good project with the VNV. Thank you, Mr. Sandep, Kasturi, and all. They are very support us. I'm very happy because we starting the pilot project since 2021 for the 420 hectare, and now we add the 7,500 hectare, and now big, yeah, for the 8th year next. Okay, this is our main project, yeah, planting preparation, mangrove restoration, and social economic program, and project impact, blended of the mitigation and adaptation, yeah. And this is our example, the land assessment West Sumatra example. Before we will do the planting, we must to do the land assessment first, and then to make sure not double plot, eligible plot, that is to make sure with the community in the, and then the mapping area with the government also. And after we already make sure the land assessment, we will have the, public engagement with the community, with the government first, community also, and district with the leader of the district, head village also, and the community group. And then after that, we make the MOU and like agreement with the community, with the government also. And for the nursery, we, the community directly have engagement, collaboration with us. The community working directly to prepare to collect the propagule, and then working in the field to prepare to maintain the nursery. And then planting, this Until now, we already have the planting for the 1,000 until now, yeah, since 2021 until now, 1,108 around hectare, yeah. After replanting, we make the boundary to make sure the plot of each plot from the community, and then to make sure we already have the plot and not double plot with the another project or another supporting from the other donor. After that, after the planting, we can check biodiversity come to the site before and after, and we collecting the data after we planting 3 months, 6 months, 11 months, and 1 month, one year. After 1 year, one time per year. Next. Okay, and after that we have the economic, social economic also with the community. We go to the school to make the presentation about the function of the mangrove. And then we introduce about our project, why we save the mangrove, and then we give the training about the batik. We will bring batik sample today, and then we go to the field also to the patrol with the government. We check all our planting in the field. After that, we collaboration with long time to the community mangrove education. We make the bulk, yeah, for the regular activity with the education with the school in the field, and then we have the village regulation also. We make the like the regulation, the small regulation, the local regulation with the community to care the mangrove we already planted in the site. And batik organic, yeah, from the mangrove, we support them to give the capital, and then to make the small business, ecotourism. We collect the CCB. And then this is the presentation how before, after replanting, we have we knew many biodiversity already come to our site. This is the species of mangrove in the site, yeah. The species we already add in the site. This is the biodiversity also. This is the regulation, it's NRS, national regulation in Indonesia. And Indonesia now we register all activity like VNV project, we register, we submit all activity, but we already submit to now government about our project. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Melinda. I would now invite Sandeep Roy Chaudhary, the moderator for our panel, to invite the rest of our panelists up on stage.
I don't have to invite, you have your names. Please, hi. Toby, Chandra, Swanya, and Max, please. We are a bit hurried for time because we started quite late and we have a hard stop at 11, so we're going to go quickly through some of the issues here. I think that we need a mic here, maybe. There's one here. And Chandra needs to leave in 30 minutes. So we're going to basically have, why were these presentations made? For the uninitiated in the carbon markets, we keep talking about carbon markets just as a market for CO2, but then there's a lot more that goes on. And we keep hearing the word co-benefit. But in the specific theme that we're talking about in terms of nature removals, it's the co-benefit that is the core of the program, because without the co-benefit, there is no program to be had. And this is an important thing that what we want to discuss is, especially from the investors' side, and we have a couple of investors, we have one project developer as well, and we have the standard, and I'll introduce them to you very soon, is that we need to understand that, yes, these projects are capital heavy, but that is what ensures the permanence of this program. Everybody out there, in terms of looking at it just as a commodity, you will fail because in 6 years' time, there are no trees anymore to deliver the carbon that you have invested in. And that's an understanding that is missing. As everybody's looking at pricing curves, but if you're really looking at net removals for net zero, as been prescribed, there needs to be a little bit more nuanced understanding of the project development cycle, because this is not on paper, and not all projects are going to be the same. So the understanding and the discussion today is basis that, basis project development, basis governments, as governments also need to understand this. And then we have multilaterals, we have standards. It all put together is what will make the removal space what it is. And we talk about tech removals and nature removals. And the nature removals piece is, we have all clubbed it into nature-based solutions, but RED is very different from this. And this is, again, very, very important to understand. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, we have conservation as the main driver of the conversation. And we really need to move the needle to understand how removals work from different perspectives, and that's what we are bringing onto the table. So we have Toby, who's joining us from Vera. Vera is a standard, and a lot of you in the room would already be aware of what Vera is. We will hear from him on how it's, from a project developer perspective, we also have challenges in terms of standards and evolving methodologies, and he will basically talk about that. On my right, we have Svenja. She's with Base Carbon. They are an investor into removal projects. So to understand from them on what they look for and how they capacitated themselves to be able to invest into these projects, and it's an important thing as well to understand. On my left, I have Max Fontaine. He represents Madagascar. He's a UNICEF UN ambassador, I would assume. Yeah. UNICEF, I said. Maybe are you a UNICEF ambassador as well? Of course you are. He's an ambassador for everything. But again, the perspective, and we've been working very closely. You've heard from Melinda right now from Indonesia. Max works with us in Madagascar. We work with a network of almost 100 or 120 such organizations. And we call ourselves Value Network because we want to build their capacity to be able to deliver scale. Again, there are challenges. We'll be speaking about those, again, from the investment parameters. And when we talk about costs and CapEx and all of those things that we have on spreadsheets, we need to bring them and drill them down to the ground level to actually understand this a little bit better. And then, of course, we have Chandrasekhar Sinha. He represents World Bank, is a very active member of the carbon markets, has been for a very, very long time, and I've been following his work. Why is his organization important in this discussion? Because when we talk about voluntary carbon markets, is not just voluntary anymore. There is so much more going on in terms of regulations, in terms of governments, sovereigns getting involved, multilaterals getting involved, bilaterals getting involved. And we all keep saying that it's not one or the other. We all need to do this together because we all fill in the void in different places of that puzzle, right? I mean, that's how we are all in this. So that's a brief introduction of the panel. So yes, I would, given your time constraint, Chandra, so I will possibly start with you. When we talk about nature removals and carbon markets in general, right, there is a jurisdictional NDC part, and then there is what can be done outside or inside of that particular target area, and how voluntary markets often work with small holders and all of that, and how they fit into the jigsaw. I know you're active in the Climate Action Data Trust as well, and how data is becoming quite the thing. So in your perspective, and when we talk about financing and blended financing as a whole, where do you think this is headed? And this I don't want you to restrict just on the removal space, on carbon markets in general, in the global south, because we look at it a little differently, right, from what is being discussed in a lot of these rooms, right?
So thanks for inviting me, Sandeep. And the important thing which came out across most of the presentations and in the conversation that you've initiated is the need for scale. And the importance of learning from these smaller pilots that Kasturi presented, and how do you scale it up at a level that has a material impact on climate, on jurisdictions, on countries' NDCs. the primary lens through which the World Bank and most public institutions will look at it. From the particular perspective of the World Bank, what is very important to realize is that we are a sovereign lender. So we lend to governments, and therefore we have to convince governments to undertake programs. And we'd use case studies of the kind that you described in order to convince governments that it makes sense. The work that you've done in Indonesia has allowed us to put a loan for $600 million for mangrove restoration in Indonesia, which is probably the largest mangrove restoration project that the World Bank has undertaken because of demonstration of the benefits that come from activity at a smaller scale. We are now in discussion with the Government of India, Ministry of Rural Development, for including these kind of activities under the Rural Employment Guarantee Program. This is the largest rural employment guarantee program, probably the largest agroforestry intervention program in the world. And to build, and linking this back to your need for digital platforms in order to scale up and direct payments directly to the beneficiaries or to the projects, I think is the other part of it. What do you need to do in order to create the enabling infrastructure which would allow this to be scaled up at reasonable transaction costs? Because the problem in many of these smaller projects is the high transaction cost that is incurred in execution and then demonstrating to your investors, to the standards, that credible outcomes have been achieved. And till we get into a system of creating the necessary digital infrastructure which allows this to be done at low cost, high transparency, and much faster. Those of you who've been in the CDM business and have implemented projects of this kind know that it may take somewhere between 1.5 to 2 years to get verification done after activity has been implemented, and even longer for the payments to be given to farmers or local communities which have very high discount rates. So if you pay them 2 years, 3 years after they've undertaken a measure, that money has a very different value than if you were to do settlement on a monthly basis. And it is possible to do settlement on a monthly basis using digital technology, and that's the logic for the whole Climate Warehouse program, the Climate Action Data Trust. But I think the most important thing that we have to figure out is how do we learn from the work that you all are doing, the people who've been doing it on the ground, how do we define ways by which we convince the governments to create programs under which you can benefit. So not just not just individual 5,000 hectare reforestation or mangrove restoration, but hundreds of thousands of mangrove restoration projects which can achieve scale and learn from the experience that has been taken. So I think these are the two elements that I'd like to bring to the necessary infrastructure for scale up, and convincing and making the case to public sector institutions to put in money. And I think that will allow the private sector to then come in within that broader framework of transparent system that you create for solutions. I can get into much more on energy access kind of things where it's a little easier. But for nature-based type of activities that you've described in the presentation, I think these are the two essential elements. Making the case to public sector, creating the infrastructure, digital infrastructure, I would argue, to scale it up quickly.
Just as a follow-up, and I mean, apologies to the other panel, he has to, because there's a launch at the US Pavilion. I'll have a follow-up, and then I'll come to you guys, if you so may allow. One thing that actually is something that I wanted to ask you, Chandra, is that, you know, we have various actors working on the same kind of thing. And I agree with you, scale-up will happen when we cannot have us just doing this work without the public finance system, because the public finance system will allow us to scale up. We get that. But I think, do you think it's important to lay it down? Because, I mean, like I say, we are the demonstration and then there's the scale up. And the demonstration shows the way in terms of mitigation cost, in terms of methodology, in terms of all of that. And when we talk about public and this VCM, like I said, VCM is no longer just VCM. This interaction, and this is my personal feeling, that this interaction isn't happening that much. I think we are all working on our own ways. For example, when we are working in Indonesia, we're working in Madagascar, we are making our own pitch to the governments, and then we have the multilaterals making their own pitch to the governments, and then we have, of course, 6 different governments, bilaterals coming in and making that. This is a bit of confusion in the sovereigns themselves, saying, where do I go? And what will be the best way to do this? Do you think there's a play for a little bit of a common platform, commonality on this, in terms of how we can have a common strategy in terms of how we want to do this? I mean, what is your view on this, if I may put you on the spot a little bit?
No, I don't think you put me on a spot. You gave me an opportunity to point out to people that 2 days ago, the World Bank launched what we call an engagement roadmap for the carbon markets. Precisely for that purpose, that there are multiple stakeholders trying to identify ways by which we can work all together. Voluntary carbon markets, compliance markets, and I would argue result-based payments as a further upstream of that, because we are moving towards payment for ecological services, of which climate impact is just one part. So how do we create a common framework which allows us to have verifiable outcomes against which payments are made, which then attracts a wider set of financial actors to invest in this space? Led, of course, by public sector because of the global public nature of the benefits that come, but attracting private capital in that. And I would encourage you to just look up the engagement roadmap, and certainly World Bank is proposing to work with all the different diverse stakeholder groups to try to make a little more sense of the global architecture for the common carbon markets, from the principal setters like ICVCM, VCMI, to standards like Vera and Gold Standard and others, to validation verification bodies which need to upgrade their methods to more digital approaches, to allow digital MRV as methodologies, appeal to Vera there, to allow digital MRV, to moving towards rating, carbon rating agencies, because as you move to jurisdictional approaches, I think the methodologies need to move towards a risk-based approach rather than yes or no binary answer to emission reduction credit. So you will find in that engagement roadmap, which is not very long, about 10 pages, our proposed approach on how we need to work together in order to define for ourselves the whole carbon market. What is this architecture we're talking about, for giving it clarity to our counterparts in the governments, to our counterparts in policymakers, to our private sector partners, on how we think about this overall space. What is this corresponding adjustment? How should countries make a decision on adjusted units versus those that are contribution units, or whatever terminology we agree on to avoid the confusion? So these kind of things, I think certainly the World Bank is planning to engage with more and more partners over the next 3 months. I'm not talking about 3 years. I'm talking about next 3 months to try to figure out how we can give a little more clarity to ourselves, and in that process, perhaps to others in the ecosystem as well.
Excellent. And I don't think we have a time for it, but I agree with all of that. But I have my own personal concerns on digitalizing everything, because I don't think we're right there yet. So I think we'll need a roadmap to transition to digitalize. Specifically in small mangrove and agroforestry projects, it's not being easy to digitalize all of it. I don't think we can meter, yes, digitalized. And number two is, I think I would have my own reservations about, and I like the whole concept of rating, but I think there's a capacity issue there as well. Because if there's a capacity issue, we'll all agree in project development and in standards, there will be a capacity issue at the rating side as well. which we'll have to talk about. But I like this engagement platform. I didn't even know about it, so thank you for bringing it up. And this is for all of you to also know that there is a platform like this. Is this public? I mean, where is it?
Yeah, it was announced 2 days ago here.
Ah, okay.
So I'm not surprised not many people know. But
Excellent. So now you know. So there is an engagement platform. It's a 3-month process. So let's try and at least put our voices out there because this is important. This architecture that he speaks about, we have a lot of experience working with government. Some of them are running around like headless chicken right now. Don't know what to do. There's World Bank, there's Switzerland, there's VNV. There's like, okay, what are we going to do? So thank you, Chandra, for your time. And all the best for your next panel. Thank you so much, Chandra.
Just to give you an indication, I think at the US Pavilion, there's a launch of SCALE and ETA, Energy Transition Accelerator, which is intended to broadly cover the energy transition space, which is different from here, but quite significant in the short run.
Thank you. Congratulations for that. Thank you. We'll let Chandra go. Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Oh, there's a different mic. Okay. Okay. That we heard about the convergence part. This is a big project developer story. Why, I'll tell you, anybody who's doing project development at scale is right now in a very confused state of affairs in terms of regulation. Regulation both at the jurisdictional level, sovereign level, and as well as methodology standards. Every other day we have a new standard coming up. So it's always very confusing. And what's good, because the other standard always tells you how they're better than the older standards. And then it's like a whole confusion, right? So I'll come to you on the standards front. Svenja, first, your question to you. You've been an investor in the nature removal space. Now, what do you think are the gaps that exist? Because it is very different from RED. Most people understand RED, but a lot of people do not understand this land space, and we've seen that. We work with a lot of investors. We've seen that there is a lack of understanding. What is your view of it, and how does BASE look at it, and you personally?
Yeah, thanks for... No, I just need to talk louder. Well, thanks for having me here. Well, from the investment perspective, I think generally speaking, investors think that investment and communities are in different buckets. They're not. A lot of investors, when they look at removal projects, nature-based removal projects, are very confused. Because as Sandeep said, it's very, very different than RED Plus projects. Nature-based projects in the removal space have a really big capex. They're front-loaded projects. It's very, very important to understand where the capital deployment of RED Plus project is more balanced throughout the project life cycle. But if you want to reforest, if you want to replant, it costs a lot of money. And if you look at it from an investment perspective, the beginning of the project is the most riskiest part of the project. And you need to deploy most of the capital in the most riskiest part of the project. So a lot of discomfort if you don't understand the project. And I think that is one of the things that is my plea to investors and also my demand to create a more understanding investment ecosystem in the VCM, that investors need to build capacity in-house. They can't rely on traders. We are not in there is no contract trading in the market where you can buy nature-based removals. You need to deeply understand the project itself. It requires capacity building, education, field trips, long-lasting relationships with project developers, and really being humble about that. You can't understand a project from a piece of paper, ever. And coming to Chandra's point and also to Sandeep's point about how do we fit co-benefits into this equation of how to put money into the project. A lot of investors don't understand that this is not philanthropic capital. Just because we invest in a high quality of carbon projects that have a multitude of co-benefits, it's not extra money, it's risk mitigation. We cannot develop a project in isolation from the community itself. We can't go into a community and plant trees in someone's backyard and expect they are going to stand there 20 years later if they don't have any economic revenue that comes out of it, or social benefits, food security, all those things. And I think from the investment community and the developer community, there's a huge disconnect. Thinking that, oh yeah, we are creating all these extra revenue generation, social co-benefits, other co-benefits, water infrastructure in some parts. And it's extra, but it's integrated. And I think that's where we really need to think about a shift. Another big thing I would say, pilot scales for projects, pre-feasibility, are often really hard to finance. The moment the feasibility is done, investors are more comfortable to come in. But the pre-feasibility investment really requires in-house understanding of projects. And I would say there's a lot of agreement that there's a lack of investors happy to step in that early on. And the moment feasibility is done, the project is registered, issuance is around the corner, investors show up. But the private investment, it can only really be in there that long, and that's for the scalability of the project, long-term scalability, expansion of projects. I think that's really important to build relationships with public finance, getting governments in, and so on and so forth. And from an investment perspective, and you made a good point about the digitization of MRV and all these things. Yes, it's really buzzy words, and we have all these glossy startups coming out of Silicon Valley that come around the corner and say, yeah, we have all these solutions to measure your project. Everything is going to be digital because it's scalable. It's a buzzword. But on both RED and also nature-based removals, there will never be a full replacement of manual labor in the field, and there shouldn't. Because it's labor opportunities, it's income opportunities, it builds bridges to the community. And simply from a technical level, if I hear a DMRV startup telling me, yeah, we can measure everything from day one, I run. Because it's simply not true. If you're planting saplings in the field, no geospatial MRV is going to be able to distinguish the sapling from the grass. And I think that's the other layer of disconnect between technology providers, investors, and project developers. We want to mitigate our risk. Good MRV is risk mitigation, but we need to build more understanding of how MRV really works in the field and what is presented in some PowerPoint presentation in Silicon Valley.
Thanks. Thanks, Winner. Over to you, Toby. With your experience with methodologies, and I think one of the challenges that we spoke about was the investor know-how on the projects. And then we spoke about methodologies and the evolution of methodologies. And we have one perspective of it, right? When we say, okay, a Vera or a gold standard has put a methodology under review or this, or we are constantly evolving the technology behind it. What is Vera's perspective on this? Because this also, I mean, we've had grandfathering periods being decreased, and this has happened quite significantly over the last couple of years. And we're told that, look, the market's in a different place, the attention on the markets is in a different place. So this is bound to happen. But how does Vera look at it? I mean, I wanted to understand your perspective on this, typically.
Thanks, Sandeep, and thanks for the invite. It's great to be here and learn more about... Better? Oh, okay. Thanks, Sandeep. Great to be on this panel and also to hear some more about the incredible projects that you're all doing at scale, and the co-benefits are phenomenal, as you pointed out and we learned about. In terms of your question, yeah, it's a challenge with methodologies. I think right now we're in a phase of transition in terms of scrutiny, in terms of integrity, in terms of new methods, new science. We talked about the rating agencies. There's a lot of attention and actors and involved in this space now who, on the good side, are bringing more scrutiny and new methods and scientific inputs and new data that we can use. But it's also a relatively unstable time, you could say, right? Because we are in a transitional phase. So we hear your pain, as you pointed out, the transitional periods in certain methodologies are tighter than they have been in the past, and it really is based on the risk assessment of how fast we think it is necessary for projects to move to new methods. We absolutely recognize the importance of stability, certainty, long-term planning, and not having the rug pulled or new methods and numbers coming out that you don't even know. You can't figure out your IRRs or figure out investment deals, etc. And I would say just bear with us. This year has been tough in terms of integrity attacks and new science and methods coming in that we need to adopt quite quickly and transition to quite quickly. But I would say by the beginning of next year, certainly by the middle of next year, we think we'll be in a much more stable place in terms of integrity, in terms of perception, in terms of the ICVCM core common principles, and having all the new methodologies be certified under that, and then labels generated with our VCUs, our credits. And at that point, we feel we'll be at a new benchmark, a new baseline of quality and integrity and confidence and comparability. And then we look forward to getting back to a much more kind of, how should we say, sort of more easy to plan and manage grandparenting and transitional kind of timeline. But as you can imagine, if we don't act and tighten as far and fast as we can where there are concerns about quality, that starts to question the whole stand, the framework, the credits, and the whole market. So that's a little bit where we've been at in this year. And I'll also just say, for our new methodologies, which are some of them being built from whole cloth, or new approaches like the ARR methodology with new methods, we can design those from the ground up in a way that we don't think we'll need these kinds of step changes anytime soon. We're doing that with blue carbon. We're doing that now with rice. We'll be going out for public consultation there and having the new methodology early next year. So yeah, I think it is just a transitional period. And Sandeep, I'm happy to say a bit about digital methods, but we can go. Do you want to go to Max first?
Go on, please.
Okay. So as we heard from Chandra and Svenja, there's a lot of hype and attention towards digital methods, and we feel definitely there's a lot of potential and promise with the digital project cycle, DMRV, digital assets, etc. But it's not going to solve all the issues. And as you said, it's very where you have a labor-intensive project or you need kind of on-the-ground eyes. That's not going to go away anytime soon for many of these activities. And at the same time, it is pretty remarkable, and we are seeing a lot of potential benefits start to work through our system as we digitalize all our templates, all our tools, which have all been done now. We're halfway through all of our methodologies being digitalized. They'll be basically all done by next fall. So within a year, pretty much all the VCS methodologies will be digitalized. All our new methodologies will be digitally native. We have about 8 pilots on DMRV, including ARR, RED, RICE, micromobility, energy, and all the rest of it. And some of them it's sensor-driven, and a lot of it is remote data collection and triangulation, where you don't have to then worry about whether the data has integrity or where the data source is coming from, etc. So we're already starting to see, in terms of our internal processing with our reviewers and even the auditors soon to be, that this will take out a lot of human error in terms of processing documents, validating inputs, cross-referencing other forms and other inputs. And so we're very optimistic that that will increase integrity, improve transparency, and speed up the project review cycle, which is, I know, a huge pain point that we're working on very hard right now to address.
We're using the same microphone? Oh, excellent. I just wanted to make one before I move on to you, Max. If you could just send somebody in the other room, please. Thanks. I don't speak for all project developers, but I think, some of us need to be involved in those decisions on the MRV system, because not all of them are as cost-effective as some of the financial systems would allow. Given that the market's not always willing to pay as yet for more expensive MRV systems. Everybody thinks they will. Everybody wants integrity, but not many people are willing to pay for it. And that's something that's a bit of a pain point that still exists in the market. I think this needs to be a kind of a transition that takes, both sides of the same thing. Because I think a lot of solution providers, like Sonia said, that we have it and we can triangulate and all of that, which is great. If it works, I'm actually for it. I think the cost ramifications of all of these need to be taken into account as well. before mandating it, or it could be an option. Happy to look at it anyway. But just as a feedback to what you said, Toby. Moving on to you, Max. This, and we've talked about this on how there is a real world consequence to what happens in a DC or a Berlin or a Hawaii for you, what's that matter? But there is a real world consequence to what all of this means, right? Sometimes when we have had discussions saying, okay, we have a term sheet, it'll take us 6 months to contracting. When I say that to you, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I'd like to thank you, Sandeep. To answer that question, I'd like to come back to what Svenja said about the financing the local population and the communities. It's not an extra. It's risk mitigation. I really like the way you said it, because as project developers, we've sitted, with these populations, and I remember this one moment where I was in the middle of 100 people in a community where we have a mangrove restoration project, and it wasn't even a carbon project yet. It was only a restoration project, and the investor took some time, to pay what they had to pay to the community. And I really felt the tension, because these communities, they live in the needs emergency. They cannot see in the same long term as we do. So if you cannot provide what you said you can provide to the population, then don't say it. Don't promise things you cannot keep. If you're not sure you're going to be involved in this project, then wait a bit before approaching the communities. Because once this trust, and the trust at the beginning is really, fragile. And once this trust is broken, the whole project is compromised, So, of course, we understand, the issues of KYCs and due diligence that we make in the big offices. But we have to understand that if you want to lower your risk by making this due diligence, the time you wait rises the level of risk on the ground, At the end of the day, it's all about the ground and the communities.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a thing that we deal with quite a lot, and I think it's these kind of forums are all needed. Why? Because I think a lot of rules and regulations and different kinds of things are made. We've been thrown with ESG due diligences which last 9 months, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, what are we safeguarding against? Then just let's not do anything. I would rather just not do anything anymore. And I think that's becoming a problem right now. I think in the name of integrity, we are actually being an impediment to the same action that we are trying to work against. And that integrity, I think the market had a fair level of integrity. It's a third-party view of it in terms of how standards have been here for years now, and I've been in the markets for 17 years. I've seen standards evolve, so it's a fair level of integrity that already exists. We're taking about 18 months to register a project. What are we doing? We're just chatting to each other all this time? No, we're not. So that is the understanding that we're trying to get. I mean, these forums are more and a plea to all the actors that there is a real-world consequence to everything that happens. It's not just I had an article and an investor says, sorry, I cannot put an investment anymore. I'm sorry, I cannot scale up. Why? Because some reporter wrote me something. I'm like, that's being irresponsible. You backing out now is the worst case of integrity that you could have for the markets, because you're building distrust in the market, not only from the communities, from the governments and the regulatory agencies as well. We're talking about governments. Chandra spoke about governments. Governments don't trust carbon markets. Why? Because they've been told not to trust carbon markets. And then when we go there and want to demonstrate a good project that will give our farmers a benefit, and then we pull the rug on it, that's it. Governments have lost interest in that any which way. So this is actually counterproductive for us to not have this real-world consequence in our boardrooms while we make decisions on projects. Or it's better to do nothing. That's what my 2 cents on this. But Max, as a follow-up on this, when we talk about monitoring requirements, for example, that come in terms of methodological changes, and I will come to you, Toby, right after this. What does it mean for you? Because Svenja has signed a certain MRV package for you guys, right? And said, okay, This is how it is. Now we're changing it in the year 4. What does it do to you?
I think on the DMRV question, I agree with what you said when you said that it has to be a pathway, you know. Maybe we are going there slowly, but we cannot change radically in one day. In the project where we work, they are so remote, you know, that I think it's always more efficient to work with the local populations. And when we talked about the payment to these communities, it's not free money. It's an exchange of services. They work in exchange of the remuneration. So if you take that remuneration out of their pocket, then for what will you pay them? For what will you, improve their financial conditions? So that also raises again the level of risk. These communities are our first ambassadors because they are the one that will protect the forest that we restore. Once they don't have any more interest in protecting the project, your risk level is so high and it's compromised.
And Toby, a question to you. And you mentioned how Vera is looking at stabilizing this methodology thing and saying whatever is in-house Vera would possibly not have that many evolutions in terms of methodology, is what I understood, right? So when you say you've developed your own blue carbon methodology, that would be a more what we call a stable. I don't know how you would want to put it out there, but is there? I mean, and how is Vera looking to capacitate itself in terms of the scale up the market has seen? And is there an understanding in Vera of this consequence of this of methodological changes? And I'm not trying to put you on a spot here, but there is a real concern around the markets, and the concern is that if we have investors investing in a 15-year project and tomorrow that methodology does not exist, then what happens? So how can we talk about and safeguard some of those issues here? I mean, and another question that I wanted to, are there rating agencies in this room here? Anybody who's from a rating agency? Okay, great. I would have probably asked you a question, but Toby, I wanted your frank opinion on what part can rating agencies play in this entire thing. For me, standards was it. So what is your opinion on that? 2 questions to you.
Okay, so methodology transition. So yeah, I don't have much more to say other than I think this is, on the math side, that this is a transitional, challenging time for all of us. I think regardless of whether they're Vera developed or we're taking something, say from the CDM, like rice, the new methods are, by next year, will be in place, and in many cases are a step change. So I think at that point, yes, we can expect a lot more stability. I think as I mentioned, the CCPs with the ICVCM will be helpful because it'll create a benchmark and a commonality there. The other thing we're doing in terms of a transition is with our ICVCM work is making sure that projects that might have used old methods can actually apply for the CCP labels, even if we've only submitted the new methodologies. So basically can go back and apply the new methods or adjustments. In this case of rice, for example, it might just be the factors that you're changing. In the case of red, it may be more substantial on the baselines. But where you basically use the new methods and you can apply it retroactively against verified emission reductions and removals, even potentially issued credits if you can show they haven't been retired. And then you can actually adjust those, and then if there's any difference in terms of the number of credits you would have gotten, and cancel ones that might not match up, and then you still get the CCP label on old emission reductions and removals. So that's one thing we're really committed to our project developer community around, because the last thing you want is stranded assets, stranded projects, because you're the leaders out there, you're doing the hard work, working with the communities, investing up front. So the last thing we want to do is discourage that, right? Because as you say, that's what's going to create the scale, is those early leaders and pioneers. And if they're all afraid because the rules might change, or they might not get the credits, or the new math makes their old projects irrelevant, that's not what we can have happen. So we're totally committed to making that transition and supporting projects through that. In terms of the rating agencies, I think there's an important role for them to play. I think they're in a transitional phase too, right? I think the whole market has been in the last year or two with so much growth, so many new entrants, new players coming in, throwing stones, trying to carve out their own niche, show that what they're doing is better, and by extension, throw everything else under the bus or show everything else before has not been good, which has not been helpful and not actually the reality at all. So that's been frustrating, but we're working through that. I think there's going to be consolidation. I think we see in the standard, the rating agencies, often there can be completely different ratings from the different rating agencies, which shows you that it's very much a work in progress and not a definitive science by any means. Having said that, I think it's a useful tool. The way I see the hierarchy is something like ICVCM might set the core carbon principles as a benchmark of quality that's common across all standards and methods and activities. Then you'd have the standards. So someone might say, well, we'd like to use a VCS methodology or a gold standard or something else based on that methodology or the way that they account for leakage or the tools that they use, digital or otherwise. So I think there's differentiation there that can add value and innovation, where we can innovate, and in particular with VCS on natural climate solutions, which we continue to pioneer new ways, new methodologies, new activities. And then I think the rating agencies on top of that can play another level of granularity, where a particular buyer might want to know a specific parameter, a risk-based assessment, as I think Chandra said, where you can say, I've got my credits, I'm comfortable with the benchmark of a high-quality emission reduction or removal, but I also want to make sure that leakage, that permanence, that the baselines, that community benefits are handled in a certain way, or I'm going to set my own parameters on that. And that's where the rating agencies can add an additional layer, I think, of assessment and comfort. So I think all these things eventually will work in a very kind of, or we hope, in a more integrated, supportive way. But right now, again, in that part, it's a bit more transitional, where we aren't quite there yet.
Thanks, Toby. I think what I mentioned with the CCPs and the retropod was news to us, actually. I think it was news to you as well, right? So it's good news. I like that. I mean, that's a good thing. I think, Svenja, another question to you in terms of these things. I mean, there's a lot of, again, it's my opinion, and I want your opinion on it. Let's just put it that way, right? And I have a lot of them. So, but one of them is that we will never get it perfect, right? There's no way in the world that we will have covered all our bases. That's the way nature removals work, or that's the way nature works, right? I mean, you cannot dictate nature. It's the way, I mean, we had a field visit from one team saying, why don't they grow in one line? I said, I don't know. Why don't you ask someone else or nature itself, because that's the way it works, right? And how do I when I have this conversation with investors, they're like, yeah, but I need more structure, I need more concrete. But it'll never be concrete, right? I mean, in my opinion. So how do you guys look at it? Or if you had to talk to other investors, how would you put that across? I mean, there are inherent risks. What do you do?
I tell them to think. I think there's a huge difference between, we talk about reforestation, right? ARR. Sounds very straightforward and organized. But the moment we start thinking about ecosystem restoration, have you ever seen an organized ecosystem? No. And I think there is also, when you go into, when you see project MRV, project design on paper, you see the spacing, you see how many trees per plots are supposed to be planted. And then you see a planting report and suddenly the spacing is down to 3 feet. On paper, you'd ask why? Why? Doesn't that have a correlation, negative correlation on mortality rates in the project? But once you go out there and maybe you look at the trees and it's an ecosystem restoration, and the close spacing is actually beneficial for the ecosystem itself because it's different species that benefit from each other. You don't understand these things from paper. And getting things perfect, I don't think we ever will. We are dealing with nature. And I think right now to de-risk investments, and scaling investments is on the critical path to scale the carbon markets and climate mitigation and adaptation. So I think we are at a turning point in the market. We've dealt with so much turmoil over the last years in terms of integrity concerns and old projects that were really singled out for multiple reasons. But especially for the nature-based carbon removal space, I think we need to build instruments, financial instruments to underwrite risks. And we see more and more investors coming in that are trying to ensure carbon delivery, carbon credit delivery. I think those are really, really good attempts to get investors more comfortable and reduce capital costs on these investments. If you can outsource your risk to a guarantee agency such as MIGA, or in the private sector, we have some insurance companies coming in that are reinsured through really large reinsurers such as Munich Re. The moment we have these players coming in, investors are getting more comfortable. And I think that is a really, really critical point to scale this industry.
Thank you. Max, a minute of feedback on what you've heard so far. And so just a quick thing in terms of, we keep talking about the real world problem. I mean, so what do you think, if you had to have 30 seconds to an investor, and investors saying, say, I want to do some climate action, and you have 30 seconds with the person, what would you sell to them?
That's a really good question. I'd say that these projects are already, just realizing them is already so difficult that us, conceiving, developing them, we should really work hand in hand. Once the KYC and the due deal have been done, once we know that we're going to work together, then we take the risk together, because there is a lot of risk in all of these projects. We cannot say that all these projects are guaranteed 100% safe. So between the consortium that develops the project, we need to have solidarity and trust between each other. And as Venya said, long-lasting relationships really help to go in on field trips together. Really helps to that bonds that makes us bond together.
Okay, that was a great discussion. We're out of time. I mean, I don't think we have time for Q&A, but I think we can take 2 questions is what we have. We have time. Okay, we have time. So anybody has any questions or anything, any reflections on the panel itself? If not, we have somebody there. Excellent. And since we have one microphone, quick one, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm Arif from Indonesia. So I guess my question is going to all of the panelists because, so I'm the project developer myself in Indonesia. So we're now developing the project, as you mentioned, Svenja, that, this very heavy investment, especially at the early stage. And now we're reaching the stage whereby, from the standard point of view, it's not really accepted, 100% accepted by the government at the moment. And then from the off-takers or, the investors' point of view, of course, they see this project being high risk. And also, from us, from our perspective, I guess you, Max, can represent me as well, that it is so hard to convince the community, the local government as well, that this project will need to stay longer, because with all of the factors, the challenges from the standard acceptance point of view, from the investor, and the what do you call it? The desire from the off-takers, for example, to buy the credits as well, the carbon credits as well. What is your point of view in this kind of hard juncture? I would say in our project, from your own perspective, how, for example, to Svenja, how can I, for example, convince the rest of the investors or of takers that, this is temporary, in terms of the standard acceptance issues, and and also from the acceptance from the government as well, and probably for Toby as well, is that what is your strategy in terms of making this standard more acceptable? And thank you.
One more. We'll just take one more. That's that. You make it brief, please. We have 2 more. So please 2 more.
Hello, I'm Václav Kurel from Carbonic. We are also project developer of Reginec on 4 continents, and we are also struggling with the getting finance to cover our huge upfront costs that we have. And the carbon credits market is like far away and not really going up. And I'm thinking whether we can here reach the big funds that are here. There are many discussions, whether the project developers can help the philanthropic or the intergovernmental climate funds to use the money properly and cost efficiently on the ground in this global south.
I really appreciate this panel, first of all, thank you. And you know, what you've been talking about is basically who will bear the risk, and we're a project developer and that's what we've learned. It's just all about designing risk. And right now we ask communities or the atmosphere to bear the risk. And it strikes me that that's not going to work. It's unjust. And the group, the stakeholder that has the most to gain and needs this the most are the buyers. So my question is, why haven't buyers been willing to finance these projects themselves, in your mind? I mean, they obviously haven't. Would love to know why you think that is.
Okay. One is we're running out of time, so we start with Toby on the Indonesia Vera thing. I don't know where you guys stand there because there is a bit of confusion on whether Vera is acceptable, yes or no, or whether it's all standards. I actually have my views on it, but what does Vera think on it? That's basically. I mean, I would ask that question. Swenya, if you could take his question, and me and Max will try and answer your question.
Yeah, I'll be brief on that because we have little time on the government one. We are working as hard and closely as we can with the governments to move things forward, including Indonesia. It's not easy, as you know, in certain countries. But in terms of where we're at with that, we actually have a couple of our key leads, Angelo Sartori, our director of engagement with the governments, and Robin Ricks, who leads that whole department, are here. So if you want to talk to them about any of those specifics and what we can do to help, but we are on the ground talking, trying to figure out how we can unlock some of that stuff.
Yeah, very quick. Yeah, getting finance early on into projects is a struggle, especially the moment it includes some sort of novel technologies or methodologies that are off the beaten path. And to your question, the role of philanthropies, I think philanthropies can play a really, really critical role, especially if they step out into structured products. And I've seen some funds where there are different tranches in the fund, where philanthropic organizations take the senior tranche with its concessional capital. They have different return expectations than private equity or other corporate buyers. So bringing philanthropies into a structured fund or a structured financial tool to take the first sort of tranche with lower return expectation, and I think it's a really good opportunity to bring them into sort of fund into the so-called co-benefits and pre-feasibility. So that's, I think, where they play the role.
Max?
To answer to your question, why should buyers invest directly in the project? We are looking to direct investors. As project developers, we don't want, to work with a lot of intermediaries, and I can guarantee you that almost every day on LinkedIn, some brokers or intermediaries contact us to develop project with us. As I said, the relation should be strong, the trust should be strong, and we should take the risk together. So for us, buyers should directly invest into ground projects.
And last word before we give out the room. Answer to your question, yes, they should. Why are they not doing it? I think there's two issues here. I don't think there's an integrity issue from the buyer side of untrust on the markets. It's they are scared that somebody else will point a finger at them on the integrity question. These are two separate issues, by the way, huh? So I think buyers are interested to take climate action. They are right now, it's better to do nothing than to do something. And that's where the issue is coming. Because if you do something, you would have some reporter somewhere saying that, no, this is not the right way to do it. Because the ultimate thing is we never get it 100% right. And we should just acknowledge that and say, yes, we agree that it's not 100% right. It never was. No science is 100% accurate right now, even the 1.5 degree, as well as the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions being reported by those companies, basis which they are doing of the offsetting. So why are we so worried about the accuracy of only the offsetting system and not anything else? And that's where I think buyers need to get closer to the project. Insurers need to get closer to the project. None of this will be done in a boardroom in New York, because there is a real-world consequence to whatever you're deciding on. There can be no risk assessment done on a project by an insurer or a reinsurer or a MEGA or a World Bank without knowing enough about the project. So yes, the buy side needs to get closer to the sell side. It's the way the world should have worked, but unfortunately hasn't, especially in the nature removal space. I am not talking about waste heat recovery and other industrial decarbonization. That can be commoditized and sold in an exchange and have a price. And that has a different play as well. Not everything in the markets is going to be us planting trees. And we never said that this is the only solution out there. So my last word on that, and thank you very much for coming in. It was an early morning panel, but we had a great turnout. Thank you so much.